So now moving on to the authentication between the edge and the orchestration, or the edge and the controllers. Authentication of the vBond by the vEdge. Again, more or less some of the steps would be similar to what we've gone through. There would be subtle differences. Let's go over them. So again, the vBond sends a certificate with whatever trusted root CA it had, and he'll send over his entire certificate to the vEdge. vEdge, as you can see, behaves in similar as we saw previously. He would verify the organization name, and he would verify if the certificate is signed by the root CA or not. So these steps are the same as we covered, where this was a vSmart or a vManage scenario. So that's the one-way TTLS connection, that hey, vEdge is able to authenticate that the vBond is the correct vBond. Now when we move on to the other part, where the vEdge has to be authenticated by the vBond, there are some differences, as you can see. So what happens is, the vBond sends a challenge. A challenge meaning he'll send a 256-bit random value to the vEdge. Now the vEdge has to respond to this challenge and give out certain parameters which would define his certificate or define the authenticity of the vEdge. So what are these parameters? The vEdge responds with his own serial number, his chassis number. So every vEdge or every entity by itself would be defined, like for certificate wise, a chassis number and a serial number. These two would be the ones uniquely defining some certificate related parameter for a device. So the vEdge would send his chassis number, his serial number, his trusted board ID certificate. That means that's nothing but the TPM chip, which is the Avnet signed root certificate. So he'll send out his own certificate directly, and the 256-bit value signed with his private key. So the challenge from vBond was made to vEdge that hey, I am sending you a 256-bit value. Please encrypt it with your private key and send it to me. So he will encrypt it and send some encrypted value back to the vBond along with the parameters that we mentioned. So why does the vEdge need to send the serial number and the chassis number out here? He is already sending some other parameters. So when we went to the provisioning phase of it, where we were provisioning the controllers by themselves, we also need to provision the vEdges into all the controllers. So vManage being the single pane of glass, we need to provision these serial numbers and chassis numbers of all the vEdges that are supposed to connect to, that this organization belongs to. So you provision these. There are many ways of provisioning it. So using any of the ways, if you are able to provision this, you need to give a chassis number and a serial number in a particular format and upload it to the vManage. And then when vManage has it, he'll send it to all the other entities like the vBond and the vSmart, similar to what we had in the control story previously. So that's why the vBond would require that, hey, vEdge, please send me your serial number and chassis number. Let me look up if I have your serial number in my database of valid vEdges, kind of thing. Okay, so he is validated the serial number. The vBond, when he receives all this information, will validate the serial number. He'll verify the 256-bit random value. How will he verify this? He'll use the board ID certificate. He'll use the 256-bit signed value. He knows what he had sent. Using the certificate, that's nothing but he'll extract the public key out of that certificate, and he'll come up with the decrypted version of this. And if he finds out this and this to be the same, that means the challenge that I sent and the challenge ACK that I received is the same. That means you are authenticated at a certain level.
He can authenticate because he has the public key already.
Yes, he has the certificate, the board ID certificate already, from where he would be able to extract the certificate, the public key basically. And since it was signed by his private key, the vEdge's private key, using the public key of the vEdge, the vBond would be able to decrypt the challenge that was sent or the challenge response that was received from the vEdge. And he would also verify if the certificate is signed by the trusted board ID. So this is the part where he would not use the vBond here. If you see, he's not using his root CA to verify vEdge's certificate. In all other scenarios where we always saw that, hey, the vBond or the vSmart was using his root CA to verify the other entity's certificate or the root cert by itself. In this case, the vBond using the trusted board ID certificate, he knows what's the root CA coming out of it, and he would be able to authenticate that if the certificate is actually signed by the actual trusted board ID or not. So that's the difference when it comes to vEdge as opposed to the controllers. So that's when a temporary DTNS connection. So why a temporary here? This is the two-way handshake being done. So vEdge has authenticated the vBond, vBond had authenticated the vEdge. This would be a temporary phase because in the SD-WAN solution, we don't want to keep constantly connect. We don't want a constant connection to be present with the vBond. We just want it to be the orchestration plane. So hey, I've connected to you. He would send me certain information. When the vBond sends out certain information to the vEdge, then the vEdge would form the actual overlay, that's the control plane bring up, and would tear down this eventually when the network is stable. The stable parameters are defined in a separate manner. Let's not go on to that. But yeah, that's why this would be a temporary DTNS connection.
Jigar, I have a
Yes.
question. Perhaps I didn't get it very clearly. So in the other scenarios where we have vSmart and vBond, they exchange certificates, signed by a trusted root certificate so they can authenticate each other, right? Why in the case of vEdge you need these additional steps of having chassis number and 256 value signed and verified? Why is that those additional steps? Aren't those certificates enough? Just exchanging those certificates would authenticate each other? Maybe it's not very clear to me why you need to go through these additional steps.
Okay, so why the chassis number, why the serial number in picture when vEdge is in picture, or?
Right, the serial number were also in the previous cases.
Okay.
We verified that it was in the whitelist. In
previous case. So, yeah.
Right, so in this case also you verified with a serial number that these are allowed to communicate, right?
Yes.
But in the vEdge case, in addition to verifying the serial number, you're also verifying with the chassis ID, with sending a 56-bit ID and doing other steps. So I'm trying to understand, why do you need those additional steps for vEdge only?
Okay, Ali, do you want to share some light on that?
Sure. So when we look at virtual components, one of the things that hasn't been highlighted here is with the virtual components, they're generating their own private key and public key and generating a CSR. So in that certificate signing request, they're sending additional information for that virtual component, which includes the equivalent of the chassis ID or the UUID for the virtual appliance. In the hardware case, we have to consider the fact that the actual physical chassis is separated from the tamper-proof module. They're two decoupled pieces of hardware that are communicating with each other. So what we need to ensure is when the information is propagated, we correlate the fact that this physical chassis with this chassis number has this tamper-proof module with that specific certificate and serial number association. And in order to ensure the authenticity of this communication, we also challenge to verify that what we've assumed is correct, that the tamper-proof module with which we're interacting resides on the chassis that we're expecting it to. So there are certain additional layers to account for the fact that you have a tamper-proof module on this physical chassis.
Okay, so would you say in the case of vBond, vSmart, you're authenticating the software? In the case of vEdge, not only you're authenticating the software, but you're also authenticating the hardware.
That is precisely correct.
Okay. Now, just to move on quickly, similar authentication by the vManage instead of the vBond. So when the vManage needs to be authenticated by the vEdge, again, you can see vManage sends a certificate. VH will verify the org name, and VH will verify if it is signed by the correct root C or not. So I assume this is very well taken care of. And on the reverse side, when vEdge needs to be authenticated by the vManage, again the similar steps follow, where this would be a vBond kind of scenario. So we'll send a challenge ACK with all the respective parameters. Again, is the trusted board ID or the serial number the correct one? Verify the challenge ACK and verify if the certificate is signed by the correct board ID or not. Just the only difference, this would be a permanent DTLS connection. vEdge would always permanently be connected to a vManage instead of a vBond, which was a temporary connection.
So why does it need a permanent, a persistent DTLS connection?
So with the vManage, so it can be a DTLS or a TLS connection. With the vManage is the single pane of glass where you are able to see, you are able to manage your network. So you would always want the vEdges to be permanently connected to the vManage. So that's why we'll need the permanent connection to be present. vBond not as much, because he's just orchestrating us. He's just telling us where to go and whom to connect to, stuff like that.
Similarly with vSmart as well.
Yes, so vSmart also would be a permanent connection.
Sure.
Because vSmart are the brains of the network. So you don't want to break or make connections with them so often. You want to have all the brains synced. For that, you'll require all the vEdges to have a permanent connection with whichever vSmart they want to connect to.
Sure.
Okay. So this is the part where the vEdge is authenticated by the vSmart and vice versa. So again, same steps where the challenge ACK phase and the DTLS connection. This I've explained it considering vEdge wants to get authenticated first, and at the end of it, you'll have a permanent DTLS connection when the vSmart and the vEdge are talking in the other way. So yes, that's all I had for the certificate part of the SD-WAN secure bring up. Do you have any further questions and anything up?
Thank you.
Okay, you're good?
Thanks, Jagat. Looking at the information that we've covered in this session, we understand that authentication, that is uniquely guaranteeing the identity of devices, integrity, that no message has been corrupted between two entities that are communicating, and confidentiality, that is, the information is only consumable by the entities that are talking, is essential to the security framework. In addition, we looked at non-repudiation, that is to ensure that we guarantee that the two entities that are talking to each other are able to validate that at any given point. This led into a conversation about certificates that provide us the means to ensure that all entities talking within the SD-WAN solution are authenticated, that their messages are integrity protected, that they are confidential, and that they are non-repudiated. That all communication within this SD-WAN solution, leveraging certificates, is secured, encrypted, integrity protected, and at all times authenticated. This concludes this session. Thank you, everyone.